got all the young people back in, got the music going again. And I went up and I saw the gang leader that started the fight. And there was an empty chair beside him. So I went and sat by him. I put my arm around him. And he says, "Who are you?" And I said, "I run this camp." And he says to me, "You're going to kick me out of this camp, aren't you?" And I said, "No way. Nobody's going to kick you out. That's not what this camp is about." He said, "But I started the fight." I said, "I know you did." I said, "But you need to hear the message today. And so you're going to be here, and I'm sitting beside you. Nobody will take you out of this camp." And I turned to him and I said, "Do you have a father?" And he laughed at me. He said, "No, no." I said, "Tonight, could I be your father?" He said, "You want to be my father?" I said, "Yeah. Tonight, I'll be your father. I'll protect you. I'll be here beside you." He said, "Okay, will you buy me a soft drink?" I said, "Yeah, I'll buy you a soft drink." He says, "Will you buy all of my friends a soft drink?" I said, "Yeah, I'll buy all of your friends a soft drink, you know." After the service, I bought like 150 soft drinks. I didn't know if they were all his friends, but everybody got in line, and I paid for all of it that night. He was having a great time. The next day at this next service, he went forward and got saved. His life was changed. Why? Somebody saw an opportunity instead of the danger. Somebody saw the good instead of the bad. I'm going to tell you that if you want to conquer the Goliath in your life, you have got to see the opportunity, not the danger. Second, David trusted God's reputation, not his own ability. I mean, remember the story. He then says that I will fight Goliath. They take him to King Saul. King Saul says in verses 32 to 37, he says, you can't fight Goliath. You're just a young boy. And he's been a soldier from the time he was a boy. You can't fight Goliath. And David says these words, and I want to read them again because they are so important. It says, "Your servant used to keep his father's sheep. And when a lion or a bear came and took a lamb out of the flock, I went out after it and struck it and delivered the lamb from its mouth. And when it arose against me, I caught it by its beard and struck and killed it." Now, you have lions here in Kenya. Is that right? Would you treat a lion like that? I mean, what happened? He was watching the flock. Now, likely it wasn't like a lion you have here. It was probably a mountain lion that's in the region of Israel, but nevertheless the same deadly. And he goes, and the lion takes a lamb. He chases the lion down, hits him in the head, gets him to release the lamb, and he walks away, and the lion growls at him. And David does this. No. He puts the lamb down, chases the lion down, and kills him with a club. How many would do that? That's a hunter. No rifle, just a club. And he does it with the bear as well. And he says this to King Saul: "The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, he will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine." David was depending and trusting on God's reputation, not his own ability. Let me ask you a question. Has God ever failed you? Has God ever failed you in your life? No? Let me ask you another question. Has God failed anybody you know? No. then why would you be afraid of a Goliath today? He's the same God. We had a gentleman from Pakistan come to Manila. He had heard about our camp ministry. He came to talk to me. He waited after a service, and we spoke after the service, and he says to me, I'd like you to bring your camp ministry to Pakistan. And I looked at him, because I'm very spiritual, I looked at him and said, no way. He said, why? I said, we don't deal with Pakistani young people. We deal with Filipino young people. He said, no, they're the same. They're same young people. I said, no, no, no. And then he says to me, he says, I think you're afraid. And I said, I am not afraid. But just to be sure, is it safe where you're going in Pakistan? He said, why are you asking me that question? I said, I have to tell my wife something. You know, you don't just wake up and tell your wife, good morning, I'm going to Pakistan next week. You don't say that. She's like, why are you doing that? So he said, let me ask you a question. And he asked me this question. He said, are you in God's will? I don't like that question. That's like what I call a nuclear question. You have no response but to say, of course, you know. And he said, if you are in God's will, then why are you asking me questions, and why are you not praying and asking God what he wants to do? And so I prayed, and we went. I remember when we were applying for visas, and he sends me the invitation letter. And it says to the embassy, the Pakistani ambassador in Manila, please, I'd like to invite Dr. Greg Lyons to come to Pakistan to hold evangelistic youth meetings in northern Pakistan, and he lists the place. I read the letter. I think the government will never give me a visa, you know. And because I called the guy up, I said, do you understand that the capital of your country is Islamabad? And you're just asking me to come and do evangelistic work for a Christian church? He said, take that to the embassy. We are not ashamed of what we do. God is with us. Okay. I took it in. I gave it to the guy. Omar Farouk was his name. He's reading the paper, the letter, and he says, Dr. Lyons, now, what do you want to do in my country? And I said, sir, that letter is from your citizen. There is his number. Give him a call. I'm just the guest. And he says, I don't know what we can do. I said, I understand. I left the office. I thought, I'm safe. I don't have to go, you know. After 6 weeks, we get a call from the Pakistani office, embassy, saying we'd like to look at the passports of the team one more time. So they asked me to drive the passports across Manila, and it's like driving across Nairobi during the busiest time. It takes a lot of time, lots of traffic. Are you familiar with traffic here? Yeah, we have that in Manila as well. So it took me 2 hours to get there. I get there. I'm waiting on the elevator. As I'm waiting on the elevator, a door opens up on the other side of the lobby, and there's a gentleman, a tall gentleman. He looks Pakistani to me. He comes and he stands beside me, and we're waiting for the elevator together. The door opens up. We both walk into the elevator. He turns to me. He says, what floor? I said, the 8th floor. He said, well, that's the Pakistan embassy. Did you know that? I said, yes. He said, are you going there? Because we own the whole floor. I said, yes, sir. I'm going to the Pakistan embassy. And I said, do you work there? He said, I'm the ambassador. I said, so good to meet you. And I saw that I had a stack of passports in my hand. And he says, are you planning to go to Pakistan? I said, yes, we're applying for visas. He says, do you have business in Pakistan? I said, not yet, but when we get there, we may do some business. And he looked at the passports and he said, are you this Christian group that is applying for a visa? I said, yes, sir. And I said this, I said, sir, we will be no trouble in your country. We only want to help young people find hope and improve their lives. And we will be a blessing to your country. I said, I would just ask that you would please grant us these visas. He looked at me in a very kind voice. He said, I cannot promise you that, but I will promise you this. This afternoon, I will take a look at all of the applications one more time. I said, thank you. We got off the elevator. I left the passports. The next day, we got a call. 5 visas were granted to us the very next day by God's grace. God can do anything he wants. Any government, any official, any business owner, any landowner, anything he wants. It's nothing for God. God's reputation will always be secure. You may think that you're facing a Goliath of a problem. You may think that you are facing something that you cannot overcome. I'm here to say, go back and trust God's reputation. Go back and believe God again. Go back and trust that God is going to take care of that Goliath, that he can even do it without your help, that he can do it miraculously if he wants. He can take care of anything that you have. It could be a health issue. It could be a financial issue. It could be a relationship issue. God is God over all of that, and his reputation is secure. Trust God's reputation, not my own abilities. Third, not only see opportunity when others see danger, not only trust God's reputation, not my own ability, but third, use what God has given me now. Saul gave David his armor. David tried it. It didn't work. And he said, I don't need this. And he used what God had already given him, which was a sling. And he had that. And he knew about it. Can I say this? Whatever Goliath you're facing, and I would even say, whatever vision or goal that God has put in your heart, God has provided everything you need right now to make that happen. You don't need more than that because you just need what you have now. And instead of being worried about what you need, why not look at what you have and say, I can do something with this. I can make this happen. All of us went through COVID. All of us struggled when we went through COVID. I remember when I went through COVID, they locked down the Philippines, and I could not go anywhere. And they were telling us that you couldn't even leave the house. You could only go for essential business. After about 10 days, I told my wife, I'm leaving the house. She says, where are you going? You can't go anywhere. There are checkpoints everywhere. I said, that's okay. I'm going to try to find a way through the checkpoint. She says, you won't ever get anywhere. I said, let me just try. So I left the house. I came to the first checkpoint. And the guards, the police, the military are there. And he says, where are you going? And I said, I need to go to the bank. I need some money. It's in the bank. He says, okay, where is the bank? And I told him, it's over here in this part of the city. And he says, well, where is exactly the bank? I said, it's in a building called Medical Plaza. He said, well, are you going to do anything else? I said, yes, I likely will stop by my office because it's in the same building, Medical Plaza. And he says, well, what do you do? Well, by that time, I was just concerned about all of the questions that I was being faced. And so I said, well, let me just give you my card. And I gave him my card here. And because I have a PhD, my card says, Dr. Greg Lyons. He sees that card and he says, oh, I'm so sorry, doctor. Of course you can go by. And he moves the cars out of my way and puts me in the fast lane and gets me through. God can get you through. You know, he's got a way. We get to there. We find our ministry, our camp ministry, shut down. And we say, we don't know what to do. So we came up with an idea. We looked at what we had, and what we had was a space like this. A gymatorium is what we have in the Philippines. And we decided to create our own company so that we could certify our building as a COVID-safe zone. So we developed the company, we made a website, we got a calling card, and then we we fogged the building and sanitized the building, and then we certified ourselves as COVID safe zones. We went to the mayor of the city, and we said, we would like to help solve a problem. He said, what's the problem? I said, since COVID hit, teenage suicide and depression has skyrocketed. Because in the Philippines, if you were under 18, you could not leave the house. For 2.5 years, you could not leave the house. Can you imagine that? We certified ourselves, and he liked it. And so he enabled us to bring thousands of young people into the safe zone to share the gospel. Even in the midst of COVID, we took over 20,000 young people to hear the gospel and saw 14,000 people saved in the middle of the COVID pandemic. It's because we decided to use what God had given us already. When will we stop complaining about what we don't have and start thanking God for what we do have? When will we stop saying that I could do more ministry if I had this, and say I can do more ministry with what I have? It doesn't cost any more to walk to the next neighborhood. It doesn't cost any more for all of our members to reach out to their neighbor. Just as the previous speaker said, the best expression of love is being a good neighbor. Use what God has given me now. And then lastly, not only see opportunity when others see danger, not only trust God's reputation, not my own ability, not only use what God has given me now, but fourth, keep moving when the battle is hot. You see, David got the stones in his bag, he got his sling, and he went to face Goliath. And we read the passage where Goliath made fun of David and even cursed him. And David said, I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you and take your head from you. And this day I will give the carcasses of the camp of the Philistines to the birds of the air and the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. Then all his assembly shall know that the Lord does not save with sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands. And the next verse says, so it was when the Philistine arose and came and drew near to him to meet David, that David hurried and ran toward the army to meet the Philistine. When David was faced with the ultimate battle, and it was hot, he did not slow down. He increased his speed. He moved forward. Can I say, the bigger the giant, the faster you should move. The bigger the problem, the more quickly you should trust God. The bigger the problem, the more you should look for the opportunities that are there. The bigger the problem, God has given you the resources in your hands to overcome the problem. You got to keep moving. You can't quit. You can't stop. You can't give up. You've got to stay in the fight. It doesn't matter how big the Goliath is. You see, David did not allow the enormity of the enemy to slow him down. It didn't matter. We have a great challenge. It's the Great Commission. In the Philippines, we have embraced an initiative called the Indian Ocean Initiative. We'll show a map here in a minute of the Indian Ocean and the 35 nations that touch this ocean. And we in the Philippines are embracing the vision to take the gospel to all 35 nations. These nations, many of them are in conflict. Many of them are ruled by false religions. One of them is Kenya. We realize that in these nations, there are these nations that already have a strong gospel witness, like Kenya. But yet there are other nations that are in desperate need of the gospel. We recently placed our first missionary in the nation of Yemen, embedded him there, because we believe that the gospel should go to the darkest places on earth. And we in the Philippines believe that by God's grace, we can fulfill the Great Commission from the Philippines. In the next slide, it'll show what it looks like if the Philippines will send the missionaries to the rest of the Indian Ocean. We are challenging our people in the Philippines to give their lives, to give their money, and to give their future to reach these nations with the gospel of Jesus Christ. But can I say this to my Kenyan brothers and the Kenyan leaders that are here? We would like to have a partner. I think it's time for Kenya to join us, for Kenya to send missionaries to the Indian Ocean nations. How wonderful would it be if we would descend on a nation with the gospel, with a collaborative team of Kenyan missionaries and Filipino missionaries carrying the same Bible, the same gospel, the same Great Commission. The next slide is Kenya reaching out with the Philippines together with two nations partnering. And I invite you to join us in this effort. If you're a pastor, I challenge you to preach a message on missions, to invite people from your church to become a missionary, to leave Kenya, to go to another country, even learn another language, even give their lives to serve God in another nation, so that together we can rise up and reach this world for Jesus Christ. That is the Goliath that I am praying we will conquer. We have everything. The opportunity is there. The reputation of God and the confidence that we have that His word will not return void and that the gospel will be preached to all nations is on our side. We have the resources. I know people think that the Philippines and maybe even Kenya are poor nations. But I'm going to say, yes, there are poor people in both of these nations. But God has placed the finances in both of these nations to accomplish His will. And we need to join together and make this happen. It's a Goliath of a goal, and I invite you to do that. Do you have the faith of David? Will you embrace it? Will you see the opportunity when others see danger? Will you trust God's reputation, not your own ability? Will you use what God has given you now? And will you keep moving when the battle is hot? Can I challenge you to make a commitment today? You have heard the messages for 2 days, and surely God has spoken to you. You should not come to this conference and expect to leave this conference the same as you came. You must leave with some level of increased commitment to God. God did not allow the speakers to be here to bring their messages as how they fit together in each day, one after another, for no purpose. And that purpose is individualized to everybody in this room, including me. And we need to open our hearts and make a commitment. I invite you today to make the boldest commitment that you've ever made for God. In your ministry, ask God today for more than you've ever asked before. Believe God for more than you've ever believed before. Trust God for more than you've ever believed before. Maybe you are facing a personal Goliath. Maybe it's in an area of your life that you need victory over. This is the day to commit to the faith of David. This is the day to conquer Goliath. Would you bow your heads for just a minute? How many are here today and you would say, Pastor Greg, I need the faith of David in my life? And you would raise your hand. Anywhere like that? Yes. Pastor Greg, I am facing a Goliath. I need the faith of David in my life. Just raise your hand. Anywhere in the audience? Yes, yes. Yes, there are many. God bless you. God bless you. Thank you. You may put them down. How many of you believe that God has spoken to you over these past 2 days? And that there is a commitment that God is leading you to make? And maybe it's a commitment that is a little bit frightening. Maybe it's a commitment that is going to stretch your faith. Maybe it's a commitment that will scare you, that will take you to a place that you will leave your comfort zone. Maybe it's a commitment even to the Indian Ocean to say, I want to go. I want God to use me. I will give my future for the Great Commission. If you're here and God has spoken to you about a commitment, would you just raise your hand and say, pray for me, Pastor Greg. God has led me to a commitment. I need to make that commitment. Anyone like that? Just raise your hand. Yes, there are many. Yes, there are many. If you raise your hand in my first question, or raise your hand in my second question, I'm going to ask you to look at me right now, right where you're seated. Just look at me. I'm facing a Goliath. I need the faith of David. God is leading me to a commitment. I need to make that commitment. As we look at each other today, my question to you is, are you serious? I mean, we're in the presence of God here today. How many will say, yeah, I'm serious? I'm serious. If you're serious, would you just stand up? Just stand up in your chair. We're all leaders. We're all pastors. Sometimes we are the ones that call people forward. But it's conferences like this, I know in my own life, that God uses to propel me forward. So I invite you, after I pray, and the music continues, that if you are serious about that commitment, I invite you to come and have a moment with God. Commit. Renew your faith. Believe God. And let's conquer the Goliath. Our Father God, we thank you. Thank you for this conference. Thank you for the vision of my friend, Dr. Janney. Thank you for those who have put this on. We thank you for you being present with us, and we welcome you to continue to speak to our hearts. And I pray for these that you have spoken to and evidenced by their response. Help us all to make a commitment, a decision that will truly change the trajectory of our ministries. I pray for each one that raised their hand, that need that faith. Give them that faith, Father. Give them that victory over Goliath, Father. Give it to them today. For these who are led to make a commitment, I don't know what that is, but you have put it in their heart. I invite you, Lord, to speak to their heart in such a way that they would commit to you, at whatever level that is, to bring you glory. In Jesus' name, I pray. If God has spoken to your heart, let's all stand. And you want to come and have a moment with God, we welcome you to do that as the musicians sing.